All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another episode of the Leafs Weekender with a special guest, as you can see right here.
Yeah.
We're proudly brought to you by our friends over at Puck Off Lagerdale. Be sure to check them out when you get out east. An absolute big beer for the big game. And speaking of the big game, we had to get someone on to talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that man right there is Joe Smith from The Athletic, covers the Tampa Bay Lightning. Joe, I'll ask you right off the get-go, do the Leafs even stand a snowball chance in hell of winning this series?
Well, if you ride the subway here in Toronto and talk to fans, they don't seem to think so. But yeah, I do think they do have a chance to win here. I mean, I know it's been a rough history and it's been a long time since the Leafs won a playoff series, but this is probably the best Leafs team we've seen in years. Probably the deepest on the blue line. I still think the Lightning. I would still probably pick the Lightning at this point, but I do think the Leafs can win the series for sure.
Well, I'm one of the guys that do think the Leafs can win this series, but I do think it is going to be a battle and a war. I'll ask you right at the get-go, for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're a team that obviously have done this twice now, back-to-back, winning the Stanley Cups, but albeit in different ways, one being with the COVID kind of, what do you want to call it?
The bubble,
series.
yeah.
Yeah, the bubble in the summer. And then the second one was the shortened season, obviously not a full season. So this year you go 82 games. Now you get into the playoffs. So that's a little bit different, a little bit longer stretch. Plus that team's also played a whole lot of hockey. Do you buy into any of the notion that the Tampa Bay Lightning may be a little tired, there may be a little fatigue, or does this team just know how to turn it on, which appears they do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's possible to not be a little fatigued or tired going through what they've gone through the last year and a half. They're not using it as an excuse for any struggles they had in March and early April. But I think the benefit of their experience is that they know what to do, the recipe that they have to succeed. They know the key for me in the series right now is how each team handles adversity or handles a rough moment. If the Leafs lose game one, it will be Armageddon, or they'll be able to shrug it off and win game two in the series. What Lightning have done so well in the playoff runs is tough moments in games, or from their when they won 5 overtime game against Columbus in game one in the bubble to they won the cup against Montreal. They were able to kind of handle those kind of rough moments and in the series that's going to swing so much in this next 2 weeks. So that's just where the experience I think pays off for the Lightning is they've been there, they've done that, they know how to correct themselves in between games, in between periods, and knowing that what the recipe is to win. So whether that can be used again here in the next few months remains to be seen. And I guess only the narrative about them being tired or worn out will maybe be discussed if they do get lose in the first round or two.
Now, a player I want to ask you about, obviously, is Brayden Point. Didn't play in Friday's game. Was a full participant at practice today. Will he be in the lineup? Is there any issue for injury for any player on the Tampa Bay Lightning that Leafs fans will be looking at to say, hey, that may be a key guy that's not available or at 100%?
He will play tomorrow. He said today. I asked him, he's ready to go. Feels good. Whether he does feel good or not, he probably wouldn't tell me anyways. But he's obviously a gamer, a really tough player, and he had been missed a couple of games down the stretch. I thought it was for precautionary reasons, but I think a couple of weeks ago, John Cooper said it was a little more than a maintenance. They say body maintenance when you miss a practice. It was a little bit more than that. But he was flying around today. Looks good. Doesn't affect his skating. He's on a line now with Anthony Cirelli and Brandon Hagel, which could be another kind of a shutdown line in this Leafs series. He's not with Kucherov and a lot like he's been in previous playoff runs, and I think he's in the wing. It looks like too. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic there on that line with those two guys. So if they're going to go anywhere, Brayden Point is one of those guys that's been the catalyst the last couple of seasons. He kind of is the engine of this team up front with him and Kucherov. So in fact he's healthy enough to play is a good sign. And Jan Rutta was a guy who missed a couple games, but he's going to be playing tomorrow as well.
Well, I look at this and I say the Tampa Bay Lightning are also getting another blessing in a fully healthy, fully ready and energized Steven Stamkos as well. A guy that really hasn't got to contribute too much for the cup runs. I mean, obviously everybody talks about the shift he came on, scored a goal, and basically went back off. I mean, how amazing is that? Tip your cap to that guy. But what does Stamkos mean to this team and being able to go for this full run now? And he's part of the team, fully healthy by the look of things anyway, and ready to roll.
Well, this has been arguably the best year of his career. I mean, I know not the 60-goal season of when he was just a young run and gun sharpshooter there, but he's really evolved his game over the years, better all-around player. And this year you saw it, like 64 assists. He scored 42 goals, including a hat trick in the season finale. And he hasn't been dependent on, like you said, to be a play driver up front in the playoff runs. Like he was like 9th in even strength ice time last year's playoffs, even though he did score a lot of points. This year he had to, with Kucherov missing the first 2.5 months because he got hurt in Game 3, and then Brayden Point going down in November. So he had to be one of those guys back in the middle where his natural playing position is, and to be able to produce like he has, not just on the power play, it's been an even strength. And so to have him basically centering the top line with Kucherov and Plot going into Game 1 of a series in his hometown of Toronto is pretty special. But I think when we asked him after he got his 100 points for the first time in his career, he said what made it special for him and proud is that he can prove people wrong. Maybe 3 years ago, people didn't think, even including in his hometown, if he could, be this kind of dynamic player with all the injuries he's gone through. And now look at him playing some of his best hockey at age 32.
No, definitely. Well, he's definitely going to be an X factor for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And on the other side of things, obviously, we talked about what team can face adversity. The Toronto Maple Leafs have had their fair share in the first round, let alone getting out of the first games of series. Boston haunts them. Obviously, now Montreal haunts them. Columbus haunts them. For you look at this Toronto team. Do you think they have enough pushback for what Tampa will bring? And this is what Keith talked about post-whistle. Tampa likes to get in the skirmishes. They like to chirp. They bring in a guy like Corey Perry, who just seems to be riding the coattail of whatever team makes it to the Stanley Cup final.
He plays pretty well the last couple of playoffs, too. I mean, he was one of their better players for Montreal and for Dallas, so give him credit for that.
Seriously, he kind of reminds me of the Marian Hossa effect, right? He didn't win it with one team, so now he's going to join the other team to try to win it. Pat Maroon as well. But for this team here, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, do they have enough to push back? Are the stars like Austin Matthews, who's finally learning maybe not to take crap? And I compare him a lot to Ryan Getzlaf when Getzlaf was young. Getzlaf used to get pushed around a little bit, then started to figure out, hey, I can push guys back. I'm a big body. I can lean on guys. And Matthew, I think this season learned that. But as a team, do they have the ability to do that to Tampa?
It's a tough question we'll only have to answer in Game 1. I think the Lightning have had to go through that themselves, too. In 2018, they're playing the Capitals, and the Capitals physically wore them down, and I think they were physically intimidating to the Lightning. We're looking around their shoulder where Tom Wilson was, Yeah. They know, and John Cooper said, intimidation is part of hockey, is still part of the game. Maybe fighting is not quite as much, but they had to stand up, to the bully and look him in the eye and not flinch. And they responded physically in the bubble playoff run and then the last one. So I don't think the Lightning are going to go out there, like you said, and just try skirmishes just for the hell of it. I think when they're physically engaged in the game, they're a better hockey team. They're not a bunch of goons out there, but when they get physically going and all their lines are being physical, it's not just the Pat Maroons and Corey Perrys. It's, Brayden Point can be a tough guy, obviously in the corners, and Palat and Killorn. And so I think the key for both teams is to play with an edge without going over the line, because both power plays are fantastic. So I think if the Lightning can stay out of the box against the Maple Leafs power play while still trying to get physically under their skin a bit, it'll be a big win for them.
Yeah, well, it looks like tomorrow night Toronto's trying to address that right out of the get by having Wayne Simmons and Kyle Clifford in the lineup, and sitting out Jason Spezza. Unfortunately for us, no Michael Bunting for Game 1 by the look of things, but we do get Andre Kasha back. And one thing I want to talk about for your perspective is the Tampa Bay Lightning have been lauded for their depth. Their depth scoring always seems to be the big thing. Last year was that third line that really took the run. Now Toronto seems to have a little bit of depth themselves. Guys like Mikheyev, Engvall stepping into his own. We just talked about guys like Clifford and Spezza and Simmons. Do you see them having enough depth to go running through the playoffs, so to speak? Only because I asked that, because obviously the first two lines could be neutralized. We talked about defense on those guys. You need to have the depth scoring. Someone always shows up. I think of Sean Bergenheim back in the days with Tampa.
2010-11, yeah. Dominic Moore and those guys, yeah.
Yeah, so you got guys like that are unsung heroes, and I'm looking at the Leafs and say, well, Ilya Mikheyev stepped up. And same thing with Pierre Engvall, but do they have enough depth to go against the Tampa Bays, Colorado's, whoever they face? Do you see them having that ability to be a Swiss Army knife and go?
Yeah, I think they have more than they've had in years past. And I think look at last year when Tavares went down with that serious injury. Like, there were a few guys that had moved up from the third to second line to kind of catapulted them there, and they were able to kind of manufacture that kind of offense if Matthews and Marner weren't on their game. So they have more this year than they did previously. Look at Nylander, it's like 30-goal scorer on the third line.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good dynamic to have if you have to use your top two T pairs on the Matthews and Tavares line up front. So I think that's a Lightning strength as well. With Nick Paul, who's been terrific since he got brought in, and Brandon Hagel, who's not show that offense yet that he has a capability with Chicago and scoring 21 goals, playing with Kane and Taves and such. So I do think that the Leafs are have a little more depth up front. They'll have to need it because I don't think Matthews going to score 4 goals each game. So they need the other guys to kind of step in. But I think the fourth line maybe be the point where maybe the Lightning have an advantage if they're going to play like the Simmons and that kind of thing. I think the Bellemare, Perry, Maroon line has a chance to pin guys in other team's zone and also score on some key plays like they have during the season. So, but yeah, the depth's better. I think what struck me the most about the Leafs is their depth is better in the blue line than previous years because that's been one of the Lightning's strengths in their cup runs is having the same 5 guys that can play 20, 25 minutes a game, including Victor Hedman. So they can basically roll those guys every other shift, and they're big and they're physical, and they also have some skill up the ice. So the Leafs having some more depth there with the acquisitions of Giordano and Brody's been great for them the last couple of years, and some younger guys stepping in. So they're not just if you have Muzzin's hurt or if Riley's hurt, then you're in trouble. They have a little more guys back there.
A little more flexibility, yeah. Well, the X factor for us, too, is also going to be what Jack Campbell can do for the Maple Leafs between the pipes. He looks healthy. He looks like he's ready to roll. But the guy he's staring down at the other end of the ice is Andrei Vasilevskiy, a guy that really is probably the best goaltender on earth. Some may argue Igor Shesterkin, but for me, I look at Vasilevskiy. He's done it, has the hardware to prove it. To be the man, you kind of got to beat the man, which is what Jack Campbell has to do here. Average goaltending here won't get it done. So I'm wondering, obviously the edge goes to Tampa, but what do you think about Jack Campbell and his chances? Obviously, he's looking for a payday too. Some of the Leafs on this team are looking for paydays, and we know big playoffs can factor into that. Do you see Jack Campbell being able to stand up to the test? That is the firepower of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I think there's always a chance here. I think I saw him play in Tampa like a few weeks back, and he outplayed Vasilevskiy for one game. Now that's April 15th versus May 2nd is a big difference, and I think O'Keel will be in game 1. How he does then, if he has a good confidence-building performance, and it's a low-scoring game, and the Leafs can win, that it'll do wonders for him. Because I think it's all kind of between the ears when you have goaltending in the playoffs. And Vasilevskiy said that himself. He's like, it's all in my mind. If I'm physically, I'm ready, but if I can stay in the game and stay focused and shake off a rough goal if there is one. So if let's say the Leafs lose 4-1 or he gives up a softie here or there, like can he shake that off? And not the eyeballs all be on him, of course. Vasilevskiy doesn't have anything really to prove here. Campbell does, but he has talent, and I think he has confidence in himself. The guys have confidence in him, and so we've seen some maybe quote unquote less heralded goalies come in a playoff run and do something special. So I think the Leafs are hoping for that, and the Lightning are hoping that their usual backbone is there and it can be a difference maker in a series which could be remarkably even here.
Definitely. Well, one area I think the Leafs really are lacking behind the Tampa Bay Lightning is coaching. You look at the Columbus series, you look at the Boston series. It does seem that Sheldon Keith did get out coached a little bit there, whether it be matchups, whether it be willingness to be flexible, do different things. What do you see here this year? Do you think we see a different Sheldon Keith? We got to see it throughout the season. Obviously, he's going to have to be on his A game against a guy like Cooper, who knows how to get the most out of his guys in any given moment, but also those guys know what's expected of them every single shift. So what does Keith have to do, not only to motivate this team, but to show that he has the chops to go up against the reigning Stanley Cup champion coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it will be that stuff that Cooper has been so good at, which is not saying motivating, but saying the right things at the right time to the right people, right? And it's not always the one that's on video in between periods that they showed all the time in the bubble. It's the one where pulling a guy in the office and saying, reassuring him here, or then Cooper says, put one hand on the back or kick one guy in the ass, depending on how it works. It's early in Keith's coaching career as far as the NHL. I thought it was interesting today to hear the comments about, just kind of tipping his hand a bit, saying, "Oh, be borderline violent." And we watched replays of last year's playoff series, and they were after the whistles. I don't know if you're trying to get message to the officiating for tomorrow or not, or how that works. But I think for him, it's just the ability in that market and the fishbowl that they have is to make sure the guys stay calm and play their game and don't let kind of like any mental hurdle that they've had in the past get to them if there's a rough game one and that's kind of part of the coach's job is to do that. And the matchups will obviously be a key part in the chess match of who do you get out against what line and what deep pair to get against who, and that'll be part of that process. But a lot of it is, I guess, mentally and finding the right way to push guys' buttons when they need to.
No, definitely. Well, one last thing for the mental side of the game. The Toronto Maple Leafs has always been the road team, whether it's against Boston, Even when they were in the bubble, really that wasn't a home thing because there's no fans there. No one really had the advantage. This year they get to be that team that has the home ice advantage and actually enjoy it. Watching the Tampa Bay Lightning having that advantage themselves, what can you say about that? How far does that go for a team? Obviously, with pumping them up,
Mhm.
preparation, being home, all those little minutia things that go into it. What do you think that helps the Toronto Maple Leafs with, or does it at all?
Well, I think it helps with the ebbs and flow of emotions in the game, right? And if the Leafs are feeling it, all of a sudden they're feeding off their crowd, then it could be a tough thing for a team to overcome. I will say the Lightning didn't have home ice advantage in the first 2 rounds last year against Florida and against Carolina, and they were able to find a way to win. If you want to win a cup, you have to win road games, right? You win the
Yeah.
games on the road, you have to kind of steal a game here and there. So I don't think the Lightning will be rattled by the atmosphere at the Scotiabank Arena, but I do think it could help a team trying to get over the hump and believing and finding a way that it could be kind of like avalanche of emotion and momentum there if they're scoring goals and their goal songs playing and the city's vibing and they're feeling good about themselves. So especially for a game seven, which I think this series could very well go to game seven. Lightning won game seven against the Islanders last year at home, and it was such an electric atmosphere. They won 1-0, and I don't think the Islanders would score if they were still playing right now. That's how good they were playing. So I think the Leafs having home ice advantage would help maybe later in the series, especially if it's a game seven, or maybe I don't know, maybe the pressure will be too much if they're at home ice versus playing an empty building for a game seven, considering that situation. But I'm looking forward to seeing the atmosphere in this week for sure.
Well, for the Leafs, they have to get over this hump. And I mean, you look at all the things that they've done. Obviously, this year, again, there's no reward for playing well unless you finish first in the conference. Um, I want to ask you about that. Obviously, the playoff seeding is a thing right now. Everybody's talking about it. You obviously have the top two teams in Toronto and Tampa playing. Obviously Florida leading the division. But how do you like that? Do you want it to go back to 1-8? Do you like what they're trying to manufacture here? Obviously, we got Florida and Tampa last year, but does it really make sense? I mean, for me, I'd rather see these two teams potentially meet up in the conference final than now.
That's a good point, and I did like it when it was the 1 versus 8. You kind of got rewarded for for finishing higher in the conference and the standings. Now, it's maybe more fun for rivalries to have the Leafs versus Lightning, and the Leafs play the Panthers. If that works the way, or the Lightning play the Panthers second round. But it does, maybe in the West too, you have two of the best team to be out early like it was last year. So to answer your question, I would like it to be the 1 versus 8. I don't think there's a lot of momentum to change it at this point. But I do believe this could be one of the most, exciting Eastern Conference playoff, no matter what the matchups are like, because of how all 8 teams over 100 points and
Yeah,
no
true.
really weak links there. We know that's an easy series win for anybody. We're doing the predictions the other day for the Athletic, and I was like, every game going 6-6, 6-7. So I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I'm sure fans are looking forward to seeing this one too, and be natural theater right here. So.
Yeah, well, obviously, Toronto fans are looking for hopefully a long spring watching the Maple Leafs play. I want to ask you the question, though. If the Toronto Maple Leafs are not able to get this done, do you see them blowing it up or just running this back maybe one more time? A lot of chatter, obviously, amongst Leafs fans saying, hey, if this group can't get it done this year, this is the best iteration of the team. Maybe it's time to move a core piece. And I asked that because obviously Tampa getting swept by Columbus at that one point, some people were asking those type of
Mm-hmm.
questions as well. What do you think? Do you think Toronto maybe keeps everything together one more time, or is this the last kick of the can, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are some parallels there. Although the Lightning had more success going into that Columbus series, they went to the conference finals and cup final before, so they had some of the core that had been able to win together for a bit. But they didn't panic. They had patience. The owner, Jeff Vinnick and Julian Breezeball, decided, let's stick with our core and let's blow it up and stick with our coach, and now longest tenured coach in the league. And they were rewarded with that. They also made some changes to their game a little bit and got a little bit tougher and brought in some new guys at Maroon and Luke Shen and different guys that could help them in the room. So I don't think they're going to blow it up. The Leafs won't. I mean, I think people will want to blow it up, but I think maybe you'll move an interesting piece, whether it's like a Nylander or somebody else. Maybe if the goaltending is indeed an issue in the series or in the playoffs, maybe they look to try to find a goaltender to be a difference maker. And because you look at the up front, I mean, it's hard to, you want to get rid of Austin Matthews? I don't think so. I don't think they'll get rid of
No, I don't
Mitch
think so.
Marner. I don't think so. Michael Bunting's the guy who's going to be like a rising star in the league. And you look at the lineup, you're like, well, who can you really get rid of, or who do you want to get rid of?
Yeah.
And so I think you can make subtle tweaks to your roster, but I think, ask Steve Yzerman, it took him 14 years to win the Stanley Cup, and he's on one of the better teams in Detroit. The Lightning, Steven Stamkos took take like 10 years in his career before he won a Stanley Cup. So there's some pain before you enjoy the spoils of it. So it's a matter of how much patience there will be if there is an early exit in Toronto.
Well, we're looking forward to this series and looking forward to your coverage, obviously. Joe, I want to thank you very much. I know it's a busy time right now with about to kick off those playoffs, but look forward to maybe talking to you down the line here throughout this series and just see where everything's at. Obviously, we're hoping for a Toronto victory. You're hoping for a long spring for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we'll see where things shake out. But my friend, I thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. A lot of fun, and we'll talk to you again this series and see how it goes. Take care.
All right. Cheers, my friend. Be safe in Toronto.
Thank you.
All right. So there we have it. That is Joe Smith of The Athletic. Guys, we'll be back in just a moment with the rest of the show.